It's almost that time. Fantasy football draft season. Training camp's underway, preseason's about to start. Let's get into the top 50 players for fantasy football. Here are our rankings broken down. Before we get into the rankings, we've got some exciting news for you.
Flockfantasy.com/endgame is the ultimate cheat code for your fantasy football season. Put your fantasy football skills to the test by playing redraft against myself and Pierre. Battle us to try to take home cash prizes. And you can ace your draft like a pro with our exclusive video draft course to help you dominate your fantasy drafts. Gain the edge with our top-notch draft rankings plus our weekly in-season rankings. And get access to our secret knowledge with our bonus articles and videos that you cannot find anywhere else. And as a special bonus, you can show off your fantasy skills in style by wearing one of our classy Endgame t-shirts for free just by being a member. Sign up now at flockfantasy.com/endgame and get an amazing 30% off your subscription.
All right, let's dive into it, starting with the top 10 players in all of fantasy. Now, if you're with us every week when we do our mock drafts, you kind of know how the first round goes, but here's a look at exactly how we have these players ranked as of right now. All right, so no big surprises at the top. You already know who those guys are. JJ, Chase, we both got Tyreek Hill, and then Cooper Kupp coming in at number 4. Now, I do want to ask you, Chris, about Kupp because, well, a little scared the other day, got hurt. Not sure exactly if it's going to impact him, but I also have had concerns before I bumped him up to number 4 about Matt Stafford, about the offensive line, about just whether he can get back to what he was in general. You feel solid still about him right here, obviously.
Yeah, I would say solid is probably the right word. I did drop him down below Tyreek Hill with this news just because we're not sure, is he going to be out there week 1? Is it going to linger? Sean McVay is saying day to day, but you never know with these things. The good news is we're still, a ways away from the start of the season. So if he's back out there practicing, looking fine, I don't know. I may not bump him over Tyreek Hill. I'm kind of coming around on Tyreek Hill, maybe potentially like breaking fantasy football this year. But I think right now I'm comfortable with this. Obviously, if we hear like he might miss some games early in the season or he's still dealing with the hamstring, then I'll drop him down.
Yeah, and you look at that depth chart for wide receivers, you just know Kupp is going to get targeted even more maybe than he has the last couple of years with Stafford back there. And then I promise it's not planned out. It just so happens our first 7 guys are all the same. I mean, great minds, right? But then here's the difference. You got Eckler in your top 10. In fact, number 8 overall. I have him just a little bit lower. So, I mean, obviously you think that change in offensive coordinator isn't going to change much for him.
Yeah, I think it'll change a little bit. Look, he's not going to catch 100 passes again. That's like a once in a career thing, but he could still get close to 80 catches this year. We know he's going to get all the run around the goal line. Plenty of touchdown upside in this offense. He's still a good player. I still have to view him as a first round running back. So for me, yeah, still in this spot.
And technically, I do have him in the first round. You'll see not much lower. It's just I've talked myself into waiting on running back as much as possible. So I got some more receivers here instead. And you know what? I guess I've talked myself into putting the Sun God ahead of Stephon Diggs. Man, I just think the floor is basically just as high. Who knows what his ceiling is? And I know you feel like he's not that big play receiver like some of these other guys lower, A.J. Brown, or maybe some of these young receivers we're going to talk about in a minute. But I just see him getting so many targets on that offense because they did nothing really at receiver to complement him. And Jameson Williams not only out for 6 games, but also not looking the part of a true starting receiver in the NFL yet. So, I don't know. I just feel like this is the safest pick, and we don't want to play it safe necessarily, except round 1. Do I want a sure thing? Yes, I do. And I don't know. I've just talked myself into him being a fantasy stud. All right, now let's look at 11 through 20, this next group. And you'll see that we do have some of these young receivers, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, second-year guys, also Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, guys who have proven to be studs. Even though they're number 2 on their own offense, it's okay. You'd rather have that guy who's a stud. But I want to talk about the running backs. So Tony Pollard to the moon. You declared it months ago before people were really talking about him as a league winner. Still on that? I mean, there's nothing that's changed your mind.
Nothing has changed my mind. If anything, I think I'm maybe getting too high on Tony Pollard at the moment. But man, everything is there for Tony Pollard. There's nobody behind him. all he has to really do is stay healthy, because we know this is a guy, he doesn't need 25 touches. On any touch, he can take it to the house for a touchdown. He's going to get the goal line work. He's going to catch enough passes, have the upside to be the potential RB1. So yeah, if anything, I might be too high on Tony Pollard right now.
I'm pretty high on him too, and I get, it was hard to envision him as kind of a workhorse back because you don't think he's built that way. He hasn't been used that way. They have to use him that way. I mean, who else are they going to use? Even if they happen to re-sign Zeke, which is some noise about that, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't think it does. But speaking of workhorse backs, look, I'm going to continue to be high on Derrick Henry. I have him here right below Saquon Barkley. I mean, I know that he's not the most prolific pass-catching back, but until things change in that offense, you know what you're getting from him. I'm not going to even talk about worrying about injury because we talk about that every year. It did happen once, and he came back and he was still a stud. So I'm going to continue to, count on him as kind of a rock if I'm going early RB. All right, now the next group, and let's start off with, kind of the elephant in the room, guy that we need to talk about. Where do you put JT right now? Because we have no idea what's going to happen with him. I think he's going to play somewhere. We both happen to have him slotted right there. It's 21 overall. That means he's, a late second round pick. Let me just ask you this. If you knew nothing and your fantasy draft was today, how comfortable do you feel drafting him at the end of the second round?
I mean, you can't feel super comfortable drafting him here, but at the same time, if you do draft him here and he works it out with the Colts or he gets traded to some great situation, you're going to be doing backflips because you're probably going to, get a top 5, top 4 running back at the end of the second round. So, yeah, this is very much risk reward here, but I'm going to bet on, number one, that he works it out with the Colts because it doesn't really benefit Jonathan Taylor not to play this year because he's on the PUP list, and I've talked about this a lot with J.K. Dobbins. If he's not out there by week 6, he's got to go through this all over again next year. He doesn't become a free agent. He's going to have to play, and if the Colts dig in their heels and say, hey, you play here or you don't play, I think he's going to play there. He's also going to be playing for a contract, so I don't think he's going to go out there, and play poorly intentionally because he wants to get paid. So it's a risk, but the reward is worth it. I think if I was on the clock here and he was still on the board, I'd almost have to do it.
Yeah, and you notice we have him ahead of guys who are going to be bell cows: Ramondre Stevenson, Nick Chubb. I think you still take him ahead of those guys because, like you said, the talent, a little bit better as a pass catcher, and he's going to play. Like you said, I'm not worried. A lot of the hypotheticals come into play. Well, what if he gets traded? What if he's on this team versus that team? Does that change? I think he's a Colt at the end of the day. This whole thing is an emotional response, but practically it does not make sense. What team is going out and really, offering the moon for a running back who's already disgruntled about his contract? I mean, look at the running back market these days. It's not happening. I think he's still a Colt, and we've been saying all along, that's not bad for him because he will be the focal point of that offense with a rookie quarterback. All right, let's move down here. The quarterbacks start to come into play, at least on your list. You've got Jalen Hurts, and then Pat Mahomes, and then Josh Allen, 3 in a row, starting at 28th overall. And so, third round, that's pretty much where we're starting to look at these stud quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's where I'm starting to look at these stud quarterbacks. And look, I just ranked them 1, 2, 3 like this all together because to me, it's like just take one. I think all these guys will be great. I know some people are worried about Josh Allen. I think he'll still be great in fantasy because of what he gives you with his legs, his rushing touchdowns. Stephon Diggs is there. I think it's going to be okay. This is just how I rank him because what's the point of like, oh, maybe this running back should be ahead of this quarterback? I mean, if you're on the clock and you're going quarterback, just take one of these guys. You should be fine.
Agree there. I mean, pretty much at this range is where I'm looking at a quarterback. It just depends on who's available. I still have a couple of receivers a little bit higher, but you look coming up, that's where I'm going to start examining the quarterback position. So now we're at 31 through 40, our next group of players, and we see a guy who, well, if you have been listening to us early on, we've been kind of saying Travis Kelce or bust at tight end, then you might as well just wait. But now Mark Andrews has entered the conversation, so we got him 32 for you, 35 for me. We talk a lot about this Ravens offense. Is Mark Andrews capable of getting back to tight end 1 overall?
Is he capable? Sure, but I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be the number one scoring tight end this year. But I think we could see him much closer to what we saw 2 years ago than what we saw last year. You and I keep talking about it. We're going to talk about it all offseason. And then the season is going to get here and people are going to realize it. But this offense is going to be drastically different. It's going to be an offense that plays faster, that throws the ball more. I'm not worried about the target competition here because what's the target competition? Odell Beckham, who's over 30 years old and has had 2 ACL surgeries on the same knee. Rashad Bateman, who I still don't think is even on the field out there practicing yet. I do like Zay Flowers, but if it's just Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews getting most of the targets, that's more than enough for him in the 3rd round.
Yep, I agree. And this is something I've come around on. I had originally said, I'll wait. It's Kelce or bust. And then now I'm seeing as far as how high I've been on Baltimore's offense and, as big as I've been on Zay Flowers, it's part of what you said that there's not a lot of depth there. And I know this offense will be better. And I'm about to talk about Lamar Jackson, why he's on my list here. I have to be higher on Mark Andrews because he's going to be the number 1 receiver there, basically. So I'm comfortable taking him here. I would rather wait on tight end in and of itself. But again, you look at the player and the talent and how he's going to help you. If you're getting a stud tight end, that's basically kind of like a number 2 receiver anyways, isn't it? But Lamar Jackson here, you notice this is where my quarterbacks start. I'm putting him as the QB3, yes, ahead of Josh Allen, yes, ahead of some of these other guys because I feel like he's got that MVP season in him potentially. Yeah, I'm going to pull the trigger on him more often than not, and I'm doing that because I'm not always the first to take a quarterback, but if I'm looking for a stud quarterback in this range, and look, I have him 37, but usually you can get him in the 4th round, sometimes even the 5th, and so every time I'm going to do it. All right, here we go, 41 through 50 to round out this group. Here's where we have a little bit of variation. Breece Hall, going to be a lot of discussion about where he should go. He does make it into your top 50, number 45 overall. Is that going to move up or down depending on the Dalvin Cook thing, which somehow still isn't settled?
It's either going to move down or he's going to stay here. Obviously, if Dalvin Cook had signed, he would not be anywhere close to my top 50. But the fact that they couldn't work it out with Dalvin Cook after spending all day together, maybe they're close. Maybe Dalvin Cook, gives in to whatever things were preventing him from signing. But until that happens, I'm going to have to assume that Breece Hall will be the lead back, at least, as much as he can be coming off ACL. Obviously, very worried about the ACL. I don't think we see a 100% Breece Hall here. But if he can get to like 80, 90% by the end of the season, given the other players in this backfield, I think he can at least be a high upside RB2, if not a low RB2, when it matters most down the stretch. So barely inside my top 50. But if Cook signs, he's out.
Man, I still have these concerns because the fact that they're looking so hard at Cook and we've heard this talk about Robert Saleh wanting a committee approach. Remember, Breece Hall really didn't become the guy until the middle of last year, and I believe because other running backs got banged up. I mean, I think we have enough other guys in the mix. We could see some Michael Carter still. We could see some Bam Knight. We could see whoever just to keep Breece Hall fresh now that they have a real quarterback. And I just don't know. I would rather have some of these other running backs who I know are going to get more touches, like the Akers and the Pierces, guys like that. Another injury concern here, what about Joe Burrow? He sneaks onto your list. Is that going to change based on the fact like Jamar Chase doesn't want to see him until week 5? Fantasy owners feel a little differently, but are you worried about the first couple of weeks of the season, or are you just thinking end of the season in fantasy playoffs?
Well, yeah, I'm always thinking end of the season fantasy playoffs because it's what actually matters. But certainly if it did come out and they're saying like, hey, we might not see Joe Burrow until week 5 or week 6, then I'm not going to have him in my top 50 players. I still think he's worth drafting and stashing, especially if you have an IR spot, but not inside the top 50. But look, Joe Burrow hasn't had a training camp his entire career. Remember, year 1 was COVID. Year 2, he was coming back from the ACL. Last year, he had appendicitis. Now he has this calf issue. He doesn't need training camp. He can show up week 1 and he'll be awesome. He's got incredible weapons. He's a great quarterback. So until I hear something concrete, like he's going to miss multiple games early in the season, I'm still drafting him as an early elite QB.
I still have him as an early QB, but you notice I'm pushing Justin Fields ahead of him. And really not just because of this injury, because like you said, if he misses a week or two, like really, who cares? You can stream instead. But I'm just going with the ceiling here. Justin Fields has that ceiling. We don't know what he can do as a passer. We know what he can do as a runner. And then, of course, I have Josh Allen and guys like that, which you might notice, yeah, I'm pushing Allen below Fields, below some of these other quarterbacks, even Herbert, because I said it, and I have to show that I mean it. I think Josh Allen falls a little bit here. I could be wrong. I don't have him come out of my top 50 or anything like that, but I'm just going with a couple of other quarterbacks who I think could improve this year instead of him. When it's time for your draft, you want to make sure you know which players to be on top of, and you also have to have the right strategy. That's why we're here to help you. Check this out.